Every nation on the planet is buried in debt. The United States owes more than $38 trillion, the highest level it has ever reached. The European Union carries roughly $14 trillion, and Japan is sitting on about $9 trillion. Even Saudi Arabia, with its oil wealth and export powerhouses like Germany and China, have liabilities that run astonishingly high. Here is the puzzle. If everyone owes, who is being paid? I study the history of finance, where money, power, and the past intersect. Nothing here is as straightforward as it first appears. Debt is not merely a weight we carry. It is the framework of the modern world. Every war, every crisis, every boom and bust rests on an unseen scaffolding of IOUs. Trace the creditor chain far enough, and an unsettling truth appears. The world does not owe a single someone. In the aggregate, it owes itself. That does not mean the gains are shared evenly. To see how we reached more than $315 trillion in global liabilities, nearly triple the size of the world economy, we need to rewind. Long before credit cards and instant transfers, the idea of national borrowing was born not on Wall Street, but on the battlefield. In 1694, England was at war with France and running short of gold. The Crown asked merchants for funding in exchange for a permanent stream of interest, backed by future taxes. To administer the arrangement, the Bank of England was created. This changed everything. The state could now spend money it did not yet possess. Lenders received something invaluable in return, a government promise that could be traded. That was the birth of the government bond, the seed of today's financial system. France adopted the model. The Dutch refined it. The young United States used it to finance independence and later its expansion west. Public debt stopped signaling failure and started signaling credibility. To borrow was to rule. Empires once conquered land to seize gold. Now they issued bonds to collect interest. The battlefield shifted onto the balance sheet. Fast forward 3 centuries and debt has become a global export. The United States owes $38 trillion, Japan more than $9 trillion, and worldwide borrowing grows by about $1 trillion every 100 days. Every country borrows, every bank lends. Through taxes, savings, and pensions, every citizen is both borrower and lender. So who holds the other end of the rope? Start with the United States because its liabilities are not only national but global. Roughly half of that $38 trillion is held by investors outside the government itself. About 2/3 of those investors are American banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurers, and even the Federal Reserve. The remaining third, close to $9 trillion, is owned abroad. Japan holds around $1 trillion, China roughly $800 billion, followed by the United Kingdom, Luxembourg, and Belgium. Saying America owes China is therefore true, but only to the tune of about 2% of the total. Most of America's debt is owed to Americans. The Treasury issues bonds. Banks and funds buy them. The Federal Reserve often buys them back, creating fresh dollars. Taxes paid by Americans finance the interest, which then flows into American retirement accounts. The debt is real, but the creditor is mostly the mirror image of the system itself. This circular pattern is not uniquely American. It is global. Japan lends to the United States by buying treasuries. The United States supports Europe through the IMF. Europe finances developing countries through the World Bank. Developing countries, in turn, place reserves in Western bonds, effectively lending back to advanced economies. It is a worldwide game of hot potato in which the potato is made of promises. Everyone holds someone else's IOU, and each promise is secured by another promise. Picture a poker table where every player borrowed chips from the next, and the game survives only so long as no one stands up. There is another layer, the most influential one. The markets. Behind every sovereign bond sits a web of hedge funds, pension plans, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks managing tens of trillions. They are the real arbiters of credit. They decide who borrows cheaply and who must pay dearly to stay afloat. When their confidence disappears, currencies tumble, cabinets fall, and economies are rewritten overnight. Elections choose leaders. Markets decide who lasts. At the center stands the central bank. Central banks do not simply manage debt, they manufacture it. Whenever the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank purchases government bonds, it creates new money in exchange. The liability on one balance sheet becomes the asset on another. Every dollar in circulation corresponds to a unit of debt somewhere else. Debt-free money does not exist. Every coin, every bill, every digital dollar carries an invisible IOU. For decades, the loop has survived on confidence. As long as investors believe governments will keep paying interest, even if the principal is never retired, the machine turns. When confidence wavers, we have seen the result. In 2010, Greece's obligations became unpayable. Bondholders panicked, yields spiked, and the ECB and IMF intervened with rescue programs that demanded austerity, higher taxes, spending cuts, and mass unemployment. For a generation, the word bailout came to mean sacrifice. Argentina's repeated defaults turned debt into a national curse. Sri Lanka suffered fuel shortages and political collapse when foreign currency ran out to service loans. When the system fractures, the creditors suddenly become visible, the IMF, the rating agencies and anonymous bondholders with their hands around a nation's throat. Yet after each collapse, the same logic restarts. New loans replace old ones. Old debts are restructured. The machine resets with a different name on the same balance sheet. In the 21st century, public borrowing is not built to be repaid. It is built to be rolled over. Governments do not intend to pay their debts off, not now and not later. That is not conspiracy, it is policy. Individuals repay principal. States treat debt like a subscription, issuing new bonds to retire maturing ones. Economists call it refinancing. Interest is the product. It is the rent charged for stability. The global economy breathes through that rent like a shark that must keep moving to live. Today's system runs on belief rather than repayment. The United States will not erase its $38 trillion. It will refinance indefinitely. Japan has been rolling its debt for decades, now above 250% of GDP, with yields near zero. Investors are not waiting to be repaid. They are waiting to renew the deal. Why? Because government debt is the safest collateral there is. A U.S. Treasury is treated not as a problem, but as a foundation. Pension funds hold it, banks pledge it, and central banks treat it like money. The system depends on governments not paying everything back. If they did, the world would lose its most trusted financial instrument. Imagine Washington settling every last dollar. Banks and funds worldwide would lose their most stable asset. The dollar supply would contract, deflation would set in, and the economy would stall. Paying off the debt would undermine the very mechanism that keeps the economy functioning. So governments do the opposite. They continue issuing debt, not recklessly, but rhythmically. Debt becomes the heartbeat of capitalism, pulsing through mortgages, pensions, and markets everywhere. That is why campaign promises about balancing the budget or wiping out the national debt sell an illusion. The objective is not to eliminate debt, but to keep it sustainable, manageable, and attractive enough that belief never breaks. Once belief fades, the arithmetic stops mattering. Rates jump and an economy built on rolling promises seizes up. Here lies the secret of sovereign debt. The plan was never repayment. The plan is to keep the world convinced repayment will always be possible. It is a closed loop of trust. While that trust holds, the numbers can stretch without limit. But trust is not shared equally. Saying we owe it to ourselves is only half right. Interest does not flow evenly through society. It travels upward from taxpayers and workers to the institutions and investors that hold the paper. Debt is not only a transfer between countries, it is a transfer between classes. That is why global indebtedness and global inequality rise together. The system rewards those who own the claims and penalizes those who only pay them. If this feels familiar, it is because the story scales from families to nations and from nations to the whole planet. Creditors are not villains and debtors are not helpless. They are two sides of the same machine. The danger arrives when the machine runs out of fuel, when new borrowing cannot keep up with yesterday's promises. At that moment, the question, who is the creditor, creditor stops being abstract and becomes personal. There's no single face at the top to blame. It is not China alone, or Wall Street alone, or the IMF alone. It is all of them, and it is us. Modern finance has turned debt into money itself. Governments issue it, banks multiply it, investors trade it, and citizens rely on it. The line between debtor and creditor has blurred beyond recognition. Debt once meant bondage. Today, it means balance. If that balance tilts and confidence breaks, the illusion ends and we remember what debt really is. A promise that cannot hold forever. If this changed how you look at the system, subscribe. History has answers. I will show you where to find them.